The 2025 Ford Explorer has gotten what we call a mid-cycle refresh. And that means it's got some slightly new styling, it's got a new interior, it's got some new technology, but it has the same engines and it has the same chassis and it has all the same stuff underneath as the outgoing 2024 model. Well, we saw the new 25 Explorer a couple of months ago, but we've now had our first taste behind the wheel of the refreshed 25 Explorer. And we've come here to my hometown in Ann Arbor, Michigan to actually drive this new 25 Explorer, and here's what we think about it. Of the 4 trims that you can get in the new 25 Explorer, this one is the top of the line. This is the Platinum Edition model, and it has one very interesting option. It either comes standard with the 300 horsepower, 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, or you can specify the optional 3-liter twin turbocharged 400 horsepower V6 that comes standard in the ST Performance trim. This one has that bigger engine, and it definitely does move. That 400 horsepower really does make a difference. This thing is legitimately quick. 400 horsepower is a significant amount for a crossover style SUV like this. You don't have that much in most of its other competitors. Some of them will have bigger engines, like the Hyundai Palisade, for instance, has a larger V6, but it doesn't make anywhere near this kind of horsepower. And when you push this thing into sport mode on the drive selector, it really does move. It's really one of the more athletic crossover family style SUVs, which sounds like a strange thing to say, but it really is. Driving dynamics has never been the Explorer's problem, especially this latest generation. It's always been more athletic. It's always been a lot more fun to drive than a lot of its competitors have been. And despite the fact that it is athletic, it's not punishing. You don't have a choppy ride, you don't have stiffness. It's really well balanced. Even the handling is quite nice. You've got a firm feel to the steering. There's actual feedback as well. This one has some pretty large 21-inch wheels and tires. But despite the fact that it has these large wheels and tires, it doesn't have a choppy ride. It doesn't beat you up inside here. It's really just comfortable. It's quiet. It's really nice to drive. In terms of the driving position in here, the Explorer has you sitting up a little bit high. I have the seat down as far as it can go, and I still feel like I'm sitting a little bit on top of the Explorer instead of in the Explorer. Now, that does mean that your visibility in all directions is really quite good. You can see over the hood without a problem. There's a fairly low side sill here, so you can actually see out to the sides. The mirrors are large as well, so visibility, usability of the Explorer, also still pretty top-notch. But the driving experience and the usability have never really been a problem for the Explorer. The issue that the Explorer has had, and that's kind of kept it depressed in the results whenever we do big comparison tests, is everything aft of the front seats. The back seats are fairly narrow and rather small. They're captain's chairs in this Platinum model, but they don't feel like very large thrones. They feel like they're kind of narrow, and they feel fairly low, and they're not entirely comfortable. The third row in the Explorer is small. There's really no other word for it, especially when you compare it with things like the Volkswagen Atlas and the Hyundai Palisade. There's a lot more room in those crossover style vehicles than you have in this one, because this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, and that necessitates specific changes to the packaging. Nothing dynamically has really changed for the 25 Explorer. The powertrain is the same, chassis is pretty much the same. The things that have really changed for the 2025 model year are the rest of this interior. There's also a couple styling changes, but if you really want to see more about styling changes, you can review our up-close video. In terms of what they've changed in here, it's really all about this interior. And this being the Platinum model, you actually have the optional Mojave Dusk colored interior, which is what this one is. The rest of us would call it kind of purplish, burgundy, aubergine eggplant, if you really want to get fancy about it, but it is like a shade of purple. It's really nice. This is probably the nicest Ford Explorer interior I've ever been in, in all the ones that I've been in over the years. And you can see some of the differences that we've had in our up-close video, but actually experiencing it on the road and driving it, you realize just how very usable it is as well. Front and center is this big 13-inch touchscreen, which is new for the Explorer. They got rid of the vertical stack version that wasn't really that great. this horizontal orientation is much easier to use. It's up high, it's easy to use. All the frequently used buttons and features are on the left side of the panel here. It is an entirely touch screen climate control, however, so all these buttons here are touch sensitive, but we're kind of getting used to these in the Fords because they actually work fairly well in most of the Ford vehicles that I've actually sampled. So I prefer to have some actual hard buttons for things like climate control, but as touchscreen stuff goes, this really isn't bad. It does work fairly well. The overall multimedia system also works pretty well, better than we've seen in some competitors like the Volkswagen Atlas. It's a Google-based system, but unlike General Motors, which is saying now we're going completely Google-based and getting rid of Apple CarPlay in a lot of their electric vehicles, Ford's gone the opposite direction and said, no, we're still going to provide you Apple CarPlay if you want it in all of our vehicles, because there's still a large demand for Apple CarPlay. So you can use Android Auto, you can use Apple CarPlay. If you are part of the whole Google universe, you can bring in a lot of your settings into this system as well, so that it's a seamless transition between your own personal devices, your home computer, your various home automation systems, and now your car as well. When you're parked, you can actually do even more things with this system. We experienced a WebEx, basically video conference call earlier today on the central screen. You can play games on the central screen when you're parked. You can watch movies, you can watch internet streaming things. So there's a lot of variation and a lot of variability on what you can do with this. It's pretty versatile. It works fairly well. Don't really have any complaints with that. Another new feature for 2025 model year is the introduction of Ford's Blue Cruise 1.2, their sort of semi-autonomous, hands-free driving system. This is Ford's answer to things like GM Super Cruise, and in certain conditions on certain roads, the cruise control actually will let you take your hands off the wheel as long as you are still maintaining focus. There's a little infrared sensor right here that reads your face and knows whether or not you're looking at the road or screwing around or reading a book or surfing your phone or eating a cheeseburger. And you have to be able to maintain attention on this because you may have to take over at any given moment. It's not fully autonomous, it's just a hands-free driving assist kind of system. And it works pretty well. It doesn't have the same number of mapped roads in terms of mileage as GM Super Cruise. That's now up to, I think, 400,000 miles of mapped roads throughout North America. Ford's is still a little over, I think, 130 to 140,000 miles of mapped roads. So it doesn't work in the same conditions as GM Super Cruise does, but it still seems to work really pretty well. It even does things like hands-free lane changes. Once we get here, you turn your turn signal on like this. It reads next to you and will automatically change lanes and accelerate you back up to the speed that you were going at if you happen to be going slower than the traffic. GM Super Cruise does that automatically. You can shut that off, but it's something that it'll automatically decide to do if you've told it it can do it. The Ford system, you still have to signal it. That's not uncommon. A lot of other systems are like that as well. Overall, though, the thing works pretty well. So we just want to go back into this lane, turn the turn signal on, and we move over. Kind of novel. It's meant to really be more of a system that helps you relax on longer drives, and believe me, there's certainly some areas in Michigan where this would be useful. Say if you're going up to visit your cabin up north, you got long stretches of 4-lane highway like this with a big divided median, well, that's really the place to use it. It's a solid update for the 25 Explorer. Yeah, it's a little bit more expensive. This one now starts at about $2,700 more than the outgoing model, but there's a simplified ordering sheet, only 4 trims. Both of the powertrains are actually really quite good. And, you know, driving dynamics was never the issue with the Explorer. But the things that still made the Explorer a bit of a hard sell for us in some cases, those things haven't yet been addressed. It's still a little bit cramped in the back, and the cargo and third row are a little bit on the tight side. However, if driving is more important to you than hauling stuff or people, the new Ford Explorer really is just as good as you might think it is. If you'd like to learn more about the new 2025 Ford Explorer or any of Ford's family vehicles, you can look everything up on Cars.com.